It's good to have you guys here. Woo-hoo! This morning, we're going to be talking about how to love your enemies. And I don't know about you guys. You know how they say that psychiatrists go into the field because they have to figure out their own issues? My mom's a psychiatrist. I shouldn't say that. Not true, Mom. But they say that. This is one of those talks where I felt like I had to do it to figure out my own issues, to do better at this. Now, some of you may say, oh, I don't have any enemies. But what we're talking about this morning is anybody you're at odds with. Anybody that you just don't necessarily care for, or they don't necessarily care for you. Somebody you kind of have an attitude towards, or they have an attitude towards you. That's what we're talking about as far as enemies. And they're enemies that you're at odds with them for a reason. You don't like them, or they don't like you. They're annoying, or you're annoying, or something. But the Bible says we're supposed to love our enemies. Now, it's easy to love good friends, isn't it? I mean, generally, if you have a good friend, it's easy to love them. Usually it's easy to love friends. Usually, although not always, it's easy to love family. Aww. That's love. Usually we feel the strongest towards, but we get the hurt most by family. But sometimes even friends and family just aren't so nice. They're not so considerate. A little puppy keeping the big dog from getting any food at all. The big dog could eat him for lunch, but he is just not sharing. But as we're going to see this morning, we are supposed to love everybody, whether they're friends or family, strangers or suckers. We're supposed to love everybody. Now, we don't necessarily have to like them. There's a difference between loving someone and liking them. But I summarized it for myself and, of course, for you. But this is what I'm going to try to keep in mind this week for myself. Treat everybody with kindness and compassion. And that may sound like such a feel-good or such a, oh, of course we're supposed to treat people with kindness. But when people are mean to you, when people are inconsiderate, sometimes our knee-jerk reaction isn't, oh, they must be going through a hard day. Oh, they must be sad people. Normally our reaction is, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? We should treat everybody with kindness and compassion. And I think it'll help if we can just recognize that we don't know the whole picture. We don't know everything they're going through. We don't know everything they've gone through. We don't know what their perspective of the situation is. They don't necessarily mean us harm. And if they do, maybe they've just seriously misunderstood who we are. But if we just recognize that we don't know the whole picture and we can trust God by just doing what He said, even when we don't feel like it, just doing what we said by loving them. This is what Jesus said in Matthew 5:43. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies. He says, if you love those who love you, what reward will that get you? He said, even the sinners do that, even the pagans, even the heathens, even quote unquote bad people love people who love them. Even the people on death row love their kids or love their mamas and their daddies. Jesus said we're supposed to love even our enemies. Now he said, and I just want to make this point, it says, you have heard it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Some people think that that comes from the Old Testament. That doesn't come from the Old Testament. That comes from Jewish tradition. It's how the Jews took the Old Testament or took part of the Old Testament, and then they kind of twisted it a little, just like Satan does. Satan takes the truth and he twists it. The Jews took the Old Testament law and they didn't quite like it the way it was, so they twisted it just a little bit. The Old Testament does say that we should love our neighbor. Leviticus 19:18 says, do not seek revenge or bear a grudge, but love your neighbor, and it even is more complete, as yourself. as yourself. Do any of us love our neighbor, truly love our neighbor as ourselves? If you remember the story of the Good Samaritan, Jesus was making it clear that basically anyone who has need is your neighbor. Do you really love them as much as yourself? Probably not, and neither did the Jews. So the Jews said, okay, we'll just call it love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But the Old Testament does never say, it never says to hate your enemy. It even says in verse 33 of that Leviticus passage, when a foreigner resides among you, don't mistreat them. The foreigner must be treated as a native born. Love them as yourself, even a foreigner. These foreigners, most of them were not God lovers, were not God fearers, they were God haters. They worshiped other gods, they were idolaters. And God said, when the foreigner comes among you and resides among you, treat them as if they were your own brother or your sister, and love them as yourself. That's what the Old Testament said. It didn't say love your neighbor and hate your enemy. So, whether family, friends, or foreigners, you should love them as yourself. But what about when they truly become a foe? Now they are just downright enemies. Well, God said some things in the Old Testament that can be confusing, so we're going to talk about them a little bit. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 1. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess, and he drives out before you many nations, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and Tony would say, and the termites, or the parasites, I don't know. 7 nations larger and stronger than you. And when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you and you have defeated them, then you must destroy them totally. Have you ever read those Old Testament passages that make you uncomfortable? Where it says, kill all the women, kill all the children, kill all the animals? It makes me uncomfortable because that doesn't sound very love your neighbor, love your enemy, but destroy them totally. That sounds a little confusing, and I don't want us to misunderstand what God is saying here. He says, make no treaty with them and show them what? No mercy. Do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons or take their daughters for your sons. Ooh, that sounds kind of, what would the liberals call him? Call God right there. You racist. You bigot. Was God being a racist? Was God telling people to hate other people? No, he was telling the Israeli military what needed to be done to protect Israel. He was telling the military of the time, we don't know how well formed the military was, he was telling them as a nation how to secure their border and how to keep the enemy countries out, those who wanted to do them harm. There's a difference between, and we'll talk more about this, judicial punishment, military punishment or judicial punishment or police officers punishing. There's a difference between that and personal vengeance, personal hatred. He wasn't telling one person to hate another person. He was telling the military, look, I'm going to destroy these I've already judged them. I'm going to defeat them. When I do, these 7 nations that are already stronger than you, when I've done this for you, listen to me, take them out completely. Don't start intermarrying with them. And now, does God owe us an explanation for anything he tells us? No, he doesn't. Do we wish he would give it to us? Yes, of course. Is it annoying when he doesn't give us an explanation of what he's doing in our life? Yes. But he doesn't owe it to us. But he even tells them why in verse 4. For they will turn your kids away from following me to serve other gods. And then my anger, God said, will burn against you and will destroy you. He's saying, look, I'm going to protect you, but you have to listen to me. You have to obey me. It would be like if North Korea came in and took us over and God said, don't let them in, or some of the refugees that we haven't vetted yet that we're not sure what their intentions are. Don't intermarry with them. Don't have kids with them. They're going to turn your heart away. Well, God doesn't speak to us the way he did back then. He told them so they wouldn't have to guess what to do. And he said, don't do it. Again, judicial punishment is not the same as personal vengeance. So when we see these passages in the Old Testament, recognize that he's not necessarily speaking to an individual person to say, hey, go wipe that person out. Go do that. He was talking to the nation as a whole, to the military strength, to the fighting men, telling them what to do for their security of their country. God can punish for wrongdoing. The military can punish for wrongdoing. The police and the courts can punish for wrongdoing. But you cannot punish for wrongdoing. That's consistent. Old Testament, New Testament, that's consistent. Proverbs 24:29 says, do not say, I'll do to them as they have done to me. I'll pay them back for what they did. We can't do that. We can't say, well, they treat me like garbage, so I'm going to treat them like garbage. They don't like my Facebook post, so I'm not going to like their Facebook posts. They talk bad about me, so I'll talk bad about them. He's not just talking about punching people in the face. He's talking about just your attitude towards people. Don't do unto others as they've done to you. You do unto others as you wish they would have done unto you. 1 Peter 3:9, don't repay evil with evil or insult for insult. Don't do it. God says he wants us to be distinct from the people around us. This is how the people around us live. They're nice to people who are nice to them, and they're mean to people who are mean to them. Why? Because that feels right. That just feels right. If people are nice to me, ooh, I like them. Oh, she's so nice. Oh, I love it when she comes in. I love seeing her smiley face. When people are mean, you don't want to deal with them because they're mean. Romans 12:17, don't repay anyone evil for evil. In contrast, Romans 12:20, which is actually quoting from Proverbs 25:21, if your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If your enemy is thirsty, give him water to drink. And again, it sounds so easy, but when someone is just spitting your coffee, the last thing you want to do is say, oh, can I make you a fresh cup? Kindness and compassion. It's what to do and how to do it. It's the attitude to have and the action to take. Treat them with kindness, not with a bitter heart, but with a compassionate heart. Again, recognizing we don't know the whole picture. We don't know that person. We don't know what's going on in their heart. We don't know what's going on in their mind. We don't know what kind of day they've had. We don't know what kind of life they've had. We don't know what kind of rotten husband they have, or wife or whatever. We don't know. We're going to look at a story this week like we did last week. Last week we talked about Saul, Jonathan, and David. You remember? Jonathan is Saul's son. David was the king, is just a little boy. He became best friends with Jonathan. And God had appointed David to replace Saul because Saul had become wicked. Saul had become corrupt. He became full of pride and full of self-will instead of just obeying God. Well, God said, I'm going to appoint someone after my own heart to take your place, Saul. You've blown it. And he appointed David. Saul at first didn't know, but then later Saul found out that it was going to be David. Saul tried to kill David over and over and over again. Last week, Saul took a spear and threw it at Jonathan because Jonathan was trying to protect David. Well, David ran away, and we go through a lot of the Psalms, by the way, are written as as David is running away from Saul, as Saul and his men are trying to kill him. So over and over and over, Saul is pursuing David because David is the threat now to Saul's throne. Even though David's not trying to take it from him, Saul feels threatened because God appointed David now, and he's trying to kill him over and over and over again. David's running for his life, just so you kind of see where we are. 1 Samuel 24. We're not going to go through the whole chapter. I've kind of summarized it here, but it's 24 verses 1 through 22. Saul basically took 3,000 men and said, come on, we're going to find David. After one guy, 3,000 men to go find David and kill him. He found out where he was. He got a report. Hey, he's at Tomei Hill. And he got 3,000 guys to say, okay, let's go surround Tomei Hill. They found out that he was in a particular area. This is one of those cool stories in the Bible. Saul went into a cave to use the bathroom. God didn't have to give us that fun little piece of information, but he did. Saul was using the bathroom in a cave, and David and his men happened to be in that same cave, just farther in. So it's like a movie. So they're looking for David. 3,000 men, they're looking for David. Saul says, I'll be right back. I've got a magazine I'm going to go read. And he goes into the cave, and then David and the guys are like, oh, snap. Saul is in here going to the bathroom right now. David's men said, God has given him into your hand. This is sent by God. God has said that he was going to give this kingdom to you instead of Saul. This is exactly how he's going to do it. Go get him. Let's go kill him. David said, he snuck up on Saul while he was using the bathroom. Get that picture out of your head. And he cut the corner off of his robe. Saul apparently was very focused on what he was doing because he didn't see him, didn't hear him, didn't feel him tugging on his robe. So then David got the piece of his robe and he went back. He went away from Saul to let him finish his business, I guess. David called out to Saul and he bowed before him. Saul and 3,000 men are there to kill David and his men. And what does David do? He bows before him. And he said, this day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me. May the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me. But my hand will not touch you. What a great example. What a great image of loving your enemy. David could have cut his head off right there and then. He could have assumed the throne right there. He could have taken his vengeance. He could have gotten out all of his frustrations. It would have been justice, kind of a funny justice, for Saul. But David said, you know what? God is the judge between us. God will avenge everything that you've done to me, but my hand will not touch you. He continues in verse 13, as the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds, so my hand won't touch you. That's pretty remarkable. There's another example from David. So now David has become King David. Now Saul and Jonathan, David's best friend, Saul and Jonathan did die in battle, but not against David. They died in battle against the Philistines, the enemy army. After they died, now the kingdom hadn't been officially split in two. If you remember, it was after Solomon's reign, when Solomon's son took over, that the kingdom was literally, not physically split in two, but where it was split officially into Judah and Israel. But still here it appears that Judah had tribes and the lower Israel, or the upper Israel had tribes, and lower Judah had tribes. And they had appointed David king over Judah. Well, when Saul and Jonathan died, they appointed another one of Saul's kids as king over Israel. So now there was almost like a little civil war going on, where now Saul's not trying to kill David. Jonathan, of course, isn't trying to kill David, but all Saul's other kids, especially now the one who was appointed king, they're trying to kill David. So there's still this war going on, and David, as king of Judah, and Saul's family, as king over Israel, are at battle with each other, and they do have fight after fight after fight, and people die. I mean, it's a war. So now King David is walking. This is 2 Samuel 16, starting in verse 5. He's walking along a path with his security guards, with his secret service. He's the king. And there's a man named Shimei, who's from Saul's family, like a distant cousin of Saul's family, who was cussing and throwing rocks at David and his men. Get out, you scoundrel, you murderer. The Lord has repaid you for all of the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. Now, if you remember, David was gracious to Saul. David didn't kill Saul. David didn't kill Jonathan. David didn't get personal vengeance on anyone. But the king of Israel was fighting the king of Judah. There were wars. People died, and these were his family, this person's family, Shimei's family. And he was basically blaming David for it. Even though David was the honorable one, he blamed David for it. He said, the Lord has given the kingdom into the hands of your son Absalom. You have come to ruin because you are a murderer. Now, David had his faults, but Absalom, if you remember, was David's son. David is king of Judah. Now Absalom wants to be king of Judah. Remember how last week we talked about how Jonathan could have fought against his dad, and he probably would have won. He probably would have had more people to support him because he was an honorable person. And Saul was not a good leader. He was a scaredy, kind of wimpy guy. Jonathan probably could have taken the throne over from his dad. We saw it happen all the time. Well, Absalom is trying to do this exact thing to King David. He is trying to take the throne from him. So David and his men are actually running from Absalom. So we see him running from Saul. Then Saul dies. Well, now we see him fighting the new king of Israel, Saul's family. Now we see him running from his son, Absalom. Anyway, he says, you're going to come to ruin because you're a murderer. Now he has this yip dog biting at his heels. And one of David's men, the Secret Service, says, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut his head off. And David said, no. He said, you know what? Maybe he's cursing because the Lord said to him, curse David. Who can ask, why do you do this? David recognized, look, we don't have the whole picture. I don't have the whole picture. I don't know why this guy is throwing rocks at me, putting dust in my eyes, calling me names when I tried to treat Saul and his family well. I don't know why this guy is being such a jerk to me. Maybe God told him to be a jerk to me. Maybe I'm supposed to learn something from this. Maybe I deserve this. Don't kill him. He said, my son, my own flesh and blood is trying to kill me. How much more than this Benjamite? Why shouldn't he try to kill me? Why shouldn't he hate me? He's from this family of Saul. My own flesh and blood hates me. How much more this guy? Leave him alone. Let him curse. And then he says in verse 12, basically kind of like he did before with Saul. You know what? God's going to figure this out. God's going to decide. And maybe the Lord will look upon me in my misery and he'll restore to me his covenant blessing instead of his curse today. David even felt like God hated him, that he was under God's curse because David's friends were hateful to him. He used to be close with Saul. They were kind of buddies. Saul used to call him my son David. You've been so good to me and I've been so bad to you. And then he tried to kill him. David's friends were hateful to him. David's family was hateful to him. David's foes were hateful to him. How did David respond? He responded in love. Now, when we say love your enemies, that's, 3 words, love your enemies. 2 of those words are difficult. Your is pretty easy. Enemy is kind of hard. Who's my enemy? What does it mean to be an enemy? Anyone you're at odds with. Anyone you don't feel great about. Anyone who's kind of done you wrong or you just kind of don't want to be around them. It doesn't mean you have to like them. It doesn't mean, remember in the Greek, there are at least 4 different words for love. We say we love Cracker Jacks and I love my husband. I love to travel, and I love my mom. There's such different kinds of love. Phileo love is like a friendship love. Did that mean that David had to say, you know what, Shimei, come hold my hand and let's skip. Let's sing together and be besties. No, he didn't have to be best friends with Shimei to love him. Storge love is the love you have for family. That's not the word God uses when he says love your enemy. Eros love, that's more the romantic love. That's not the word that God used. God used the agape love. Love sacrificially. Show kindness and compassion to everyone. Because you don't know the whole story. You don't know what Shimei is going through. You don't know if God told him to do it to teach you a lesson. You don't know what the jerk across the street or your coworker or anybody else, your friends, your family. You say, oh, I don't have any enemies, but you haven't talked to your kids in 3 years. That's what I mean by an enemy. It's anyone that you're at odds with. We don't have to like them. If you remember in 1 Corinthians 13, we took, 8 weeks to go through 1 Corinthians 13 to look at all the different, some of the characteristics. There are 15 different characteristics, so we did a couple a week. But love is action. It's not feeling. Love is action. Love is being patient, long-tempered. Love is being kind. Love is not self-seeking. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. I just took these out instead of going through the whole thing to show you. Love is action. You don't have to be besties with someone to love your enemy. It means treating them, this is where I just kind of summarized it to, kindness with compassion. if you truly have compassion for someone and you're truly treating them with kindness, you're going to try to protect them. You're going to try to look out for them. You're going to try to always hope the best for them. Treat them with kindness and compassion. We're supposed to love friends and family. We're supposed to love strangers and suckers. We all have suckers in our life, right? We're supposed to treat them all with love, even when they're hateful to us. Is that fair? No. No. It's gracious. It's merciful because God told us to do it. Now, I know sometimes it's easy on a Sunday morning to say, oh, of course, love our enemies, of course. But sometimes it's harder than it sounds. Think about it. Don't answer. Who don't you like? Don't answer. I don't want Tony to get uncomfortable that everyone's yelling, my pastor, Tony. Just kidding. Who don't you like? Who treats you poorly? Who do you resent? Who do you despise? Who are you just at odds with? Or who do you just, you know what, I just assume them not come over. I just don't want to be around them. I don't have to be around everybody. And you may say, no, nobody. I love everybody. Everybody loves me. Really? Nobody? There's nobody you might despise? I do. I despise these people. I'm not kidding. When I see pictures of them, when I hear about them, my heart is filled with anger, filled with loathing, filled with, if I had a machete in my hand and they were right in front of me right now, you better watch out. You're going to get something on your pretty shirt. I get filled with anger. Militarily, they need to be destroyed. They need to be destroyed militarily. Judicial punishment is not the same as personal vengeance. We don't have the big picture. We don't know. When you say, do you hate ISIS? I'd say, absolutely, with all my heart, I despise them. What about that guy in the corner? Well, I don't know that guy in the corner. What about Jihadi John? What about these guys from America and these guys from Britain that joined them? Are they wrong? Absolutely. Do I hate them? I'm dealing with it. It's not up to me. Again, I don't have to like these people. I don't have to appreciate what they're doing. But if I were around them, I'm supposed to treat them. I haven't worked out all the details in what I'm about to say. With kindness and compassion. Think about it. There's a guy, you remember, I think his name is Walid Shubat, who used to be a terrorist, used to be a Palestinian Liberation Operations, the PLO. He used to be a terrorist. Now he's a Christian, famous Christian author, famous Christian speaker. Most of us might have seen his books or read some of his books. I appreciate him. I appreciate the things that he says. He used to be one of these guys. We don't know what they're told. You know, we only get the news that we're told, right? We're not in the Middle East. We are told what the news people tell us, and they are told whatever or whoever is above them tells them. Oh, we have breaking news. Well, where's that breaking news? It's on a piece of paper on my computer right here. We have breaking news from some organization. It could be completely different. I don't think it's completely different. I've told some of you guys that I used to, when I traveled a lot doing medical things, virtually every one of my cab drivers was a Muslim. I'm not saying anything racist or anything else, just a matter of statement. Every single cab driver I can remember was a Muslim. And you know me, I'm always up for good conversation. And so we talk about it. We talk about the Bible, we talk about the Quran. And I remember one of the cab drivers told me, the Middle East is nothing like you're told. I'm from there. I still go back there. Most of the Arabs don't hate the Jews, and most of the Jews don't hate the Arabs. Of course you have the gangs. Of course you have those bad apples. Of course you have bad people. But in general, it's not just full of war the way you see. Of course, I fought him, and I fought him on the inside if I didn't fight him on the outside, and you don't know. My government tells me everything. They tell me the truth. We don't know. We don't know if someone's profiting from one war to another, profiting on both sides, sending us into wars that we shouldn't be fighting. We don't know. Waleed Shoebat used to be one of these guys. Did he do bad things? Yes, he did. We don't know. We're supposed to treat people with compassion. This is another one that just drives me crazy, and I don't know if I'll remember the whole story here. This is one of those cool 4D ultrasounds now. This baby is in the womb, very crowded. I wouldn't be caring for that much, but just so precious. No question, right, that this is a human life. This is alive, and it's not a dolphin. It's a baby. Do you know that in New Mexico, we can kill this baby right now? If I, as a woman, am under emotional anguish, or maybe my blood pressure's going up and I'm having some medical issues, not necessarily my life's dependent on it, my husband or my boyfriend leaves me and I don't have the financial ability, so I'm under emotional duress about having this baby, it is legal in our state to partially deliver this baby, put an instrument through its skull, scramble its brains, crush its skull, a baby just like this, pull out the little parts, and then tear out limb by limb by limb. Does it look like a little blob of tissue? No, it looks like an arm, and it looks like a leg and a foot and toes. So much so that the abortionists, after they do this, they have to piece the baby back together to make sure they got all its parts, to make sure that they have 2 arms and 2 hands, 2 elbows, 2 upper legs, 2 lower legs, 2 feet, because they want to make sure the mom doesn't get infected by leaving little baby parts in the womb. This doesn't bother us like ISIS bothers us. Virtually every American hates ISIS. A lot of us have either had them, or I think virtually all of us know someone who's had an abortion. But we look at it from, but the woman's perspective. She's only 18. She was 16. She's in school. It would destroy her whole life. Well, what about this baby's life? I don't remember the story. I meant to print it out so I'd remember the story. Tony might remember more of it. But people from, students from UNM, they went on no. These were even high school. It was a youth camp. A youth camp for, I think, high school students, maybe even middle school students.
Kind of
a science camp, like a science fair kind of thing, a science camp. This was UNM. Donated babies, aborted babies' brains to be dissected for scientific learning at a youth camp. This story, I just saw it yesterday. We don't know if the students were aware. Probably not. Oh, by the way, you're dissecting an aborted baby's brain. They knew they were brains. Where did they think they came from? I don't know. Monkeys? I don't know. You think the moms knew that their 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds were dissecting aborted babies' brains? Who are we? Who are we as a culture that would be okay, that would be encouraged, that wouldn't at least be hidden? We're messed up as a culture. I know it's easy for us to point our fingers at other cultures and say how barbaric they are. But we're pretty barbaric on our own when we choose to be. So, yeah, I'm still working on some of my, my issues. My love my enemy issues. Again, it doesn't mean we need to think fondly of them. It doesn't mean we need to like them. But we need to, I'm going to try to get in my heart and my head all week. I'll try a whole week where I treat everybody with kindness and compassion. The jerk that cuts me off? Yeah. The client who comes in 2 hours late and is demanding that we see them right away? Yeah. We may not be able to accommodate, but we'll try to treat them with kindness and compassion. Easier said than done. But we just need to remember we don't know the whole picture behind someone.
They were the bitterest of enemies. For more than a decade, here on the streets of Milwaukee, 2 men shared a mutual disgust. One was a hard-nosed cop named Ray Robakowski.
I wasn't a social worker, I was a police officer. My job was to take care of what needed to be taken care of.
Which is why you didn't like him.
Oh, definitely didn't.
The other,
No.
a drug dealer and gangbanger named Jacob Macklin. Jacob got arrested so many times you can watch him grow old in his mugshots. And it was that career thug and this officer who sat down one day over a cup of coffee. The district attorney's office arranged it.
The meeting was to see if cop and criminal could work together and come up with a way to get out of this vicious cycle. But neither guy was buying it. Ray was only here because his boss made him come, and Jacob was tricked into coming, told he had a job interview. So they basically just glared at each other the entire time.
What were you thinking?
You're going to screw up and I'm going to find you and put you back.
He was dead set on putting you back in jail.
Yeah. I'm glad he changed his mind. He sent me on maybe 14 or 15 interviews in 2 weeks. And one of them was Community Warehouse.
Community Warehouse is a nonprofit home improvement store that hires ex-cons and teaches them job skills.
Which one did they pay for?
Jacob started working here 8 years ago and is now on the management team. To this day, he can't thank Ray enough.
You grateful?
Very. Oh man, very.
He said very, at least half a dozen times.
Very much so.
And as for that very helpful cop, he retired from the police force last year.
But you still wanted to work. You wanted a job.
Yeah.
So who did you turn to for work?
Jacob Macklin. And he laughed. Now he held the cards. But, I wanted to be here.
Through Community Warehouse, with his new friend Jacob, Ray has now helped more than a dozen other ex-cons leave their past behind.
Is Ray a different guy than he was when you first
Oh,
met?
definitely. Did I say that too loud?
Pretty loud.
Jacob, of course, is equally unrecognizable. Today, his only high-speed chases are around swing sets. He's got 4 kids and has vowed the cycle stops with him. All proof that if you can find the trust, sometimes your enemies can be your best allies.
We don't know the whole picture. We need to obey God by loving all of them. We need to love our enemies, friends or family, strangers or suckers. We're supposed to treat everybody with kindness and compassion. Not just peace at any price. We are ambassadors for Jesus Christ. This isn't random acts of kindness. It's righteous acts of kindness. It's righteously being a child of God, trying to reach people who are lost and dying in this world. Of course, the whole point in everything we do should be to bring glory to God. How? By reaching people for Christ and helping them become more like Christ. Then we help them get saved and soaked and serious about their faith. That's the point. The point isn't just to love on people. The point is to help them see there's a different way, a truly different way, not just a new turning over a new leaf, but getting a new life in Jesus Christ. But it starts by loving everyone as children of God and as obedient children of God. All right, let's pray. Lord Jesus, thank you for this church. Thank you for these people. God, thank you for the opportunities you give us every day, every week to love people that sometimes seem completely unlovable. God, to show kindness to people who are not kind to us, to be gracious to people who aren't gracious to us. God, help us humble ourselves enough that we can treat them with kindness and compassion, even when they don't deserve it. But God, you treated us with kindness and compassion when we were your enemies. God, help us do the same to ours. Help us show them the love that you've shown us. God, so that we can live this life honorable to you. God, that we can bring glory to who you are and your name. God, if there's anybody here that doesn't know you, I pray that right now they would just say, Jesus, I'm a sinner. Please forgive me. Please save me. Please give me a new life. God, thank you for loving us so that we can love you back and love other people. God, if there are people here that have given their life to you, but they haven't followed you in obedience and to be baptized, God, help them do that. Help them get over whatever it is that's keeping them from living an obedient life, from submitting everything to you and by getting baptized. And God, help us not be so distracted by everything in this world that we aren't sold out to you and living seriously the faith that we proclaim, the faith that we profess. God, help us get serious about it. Help us realize that our time is short. As people, if not as a country, our time is short. Help us live the way you would have us live. Help us represent you. Help us be ambassadors for you, good ambassadors for you, like you've called us to be. We love you. We praise you. Help us this week love our friends and our family, love strangers, and love the suckers. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.